A reading from St. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 8, beginning to read at verse 23. And when Jesus got into the boat, his disciples followed him. A gale arose on the lake, so great that the boat was being swamped by the waves. But he was asleep. And they went and woke him up, saying, "Lord, save us, we are perishing." And he said to them, "Why are you afraid, you of little faith?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a dead calm. They were amazed, saying, "What sort of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?" When I came to Portsmouth back in 2004, I soon came to realize that the sea and the seafront hold a significant place in the city's identity and in people's way of life. I discovered that lots of people went on holiday cruises. Well, of course, the docks are on their doorstep. Why wouldn't they? The coming and going of naval ships is part and parcel of local knowledge. And the plying of ferries to and from France or the Isle of Wight, part of daily life, and a familiar sight from the shore. I was brought up in landlocked Berkshire, and the sea for me was for holiday visits only, linked with ice cream cones, crabs and sandcastles, the seashore different in every way from home. While I loved all that, I never really got on with boats, despite the fact that my dad was a really good oarsman on the river. I was perfectly capable of feeling sick on a pleasure boat on the River Thames. And when on a ferry to Ireland in slightly rough weather, sat on the deck in a tense heap of misery, while others I knew were down below deck, tucking into fried breakfast with no ill effects. To be at sea in a full-blown storm, and especially in a little boat, is something that all my life I have taken care to avoid, and must be absolutely terrifying. It is of no surprise that the sea in biblical times was seen as a primal element to be tamed, or as a force from which humans needed God's deliverance, a symbol of destruction and evil and mighty power. To see the strength of huge waves crashing over the seafront in some of the rarely bad storms of last year evokes much the same sense of awe, as well as tapping into that really good metaphor of storminess to describe those times in our lives when everything seems upheaved, when forces quite beyond our control are at play, and we feel fragile and vulnerable and tossed about. Today we have heard the story of the stilling of the storm as told by Matthew. You can find the same story in Mark and in Luke, but each gospel writer shapes the story in a slightly different way, with Matthew placing his version as the fourth of a series of 9 miracles that follow the Sermon on the Mount, and just after 2 statements from Jesus about discipleship, one about the perils of following him, and another about the need for total commitment. Some commentators have argued that the story as told by Matthew is a symbolic representation of what it is to follow Jesus. The sea and the storm indicate the world and its struggles, and the wild, untamable power of evil within it, while the ship is the early church. Just as the disciples are rocked by the storm, so the little ship of the church gets dangerously tossed about, but through faith in Jesus must stand firm against all that assails it. And that then meant persecution. Others take a different view, however, and look instead to the parallels in the way Matthew tells the story with that of Jonah in the Old Testament. Jonah, like Jesus, made a decision to get on a boat. Though it has to be said, in his case, this was to get away from what God was asking of him, to preach to the people of Nineveh. The storm that blew up in both accounts is described in a very similar way, and the fear it induced. In both stories, the main character slept, unaware of what was raging around him, and had to be woken up. By divine intervention in each case, calm was restored. But it is in the differences that Matthew seeks to highlight the significance of Jesus. Jonah had to pray to God for deliverance, but Jesus could himself command the waves to be still. The divine intervention was his. Jonah, realizing that the storm was God's way of telling him he was out of line, asked the crew to throw him overboard. Jesus had no need of such correction, and what God was doing in him was nothing short of new creation. What sort of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? The disciples ask in wonder. The faith they lack is about understanding quite who it is that they are following. They are still struggling to grasp that and what Jesus can offer. Well, all that is all very good. I don't know about you, however, but what is important for me in this story is the assurance that Jesus is in the boat with me, and that he remains there, a calming presence, however great the storm that rages, and that he has the power to bring stillness and calm and a deep sense of peace. I know that my trust falls short, and that sometimes, when the dark clouds gather and the winds begin to howl and the little boat of life seems in danger of sinking, I forget that he is present, or I forget to turn to him for help and try to go it alone. But at other times, and especially perhaps when the chips have really been down, I have known that he is there in the boat with me, sensed the power of his love, and felt the waves settle. I have heard that voice of calm and been given the strength I need. In all the uncertainties of the present time, let us pray for that for one another, that we may know his presence and his peace and grow in trust day by day.